The music was loud, the room was full of people pretending not to count the years, and I was standing beside a table of old photographs when someone gently touched my arm. I turned around and saw the one face I had secretly hoped I would see and desperately feared I would. Emma Carter, my old lab partner, my first real crush, stood only a few feet away with tears already shining in her eyes. Then she pulled me away from the crowd and asked me a question that made the entire room disappear. Did I ever get her letter? For a few seconds, I could not even breathe. A letter. I had never received one. But the way her face fell told me that somewhere, more than 20 years ago, a single missing envelope had changed both our lives. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that some people are worth finding again, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes the smallest act of support can help a story of hope reach someone who needs to hear it today. Back in high school, Emma had been the quiet girl in our chemistry class who always tied her dark hair into a loose ponytail when she was concentrating. I was the awkward boy who knew how to solve equations but forgot every intelligent sentence I had prepared the moment she looked directly at me. We became lab partners during our junior year, mostly because our teacher arranged the seating alphabetically. I still remembered the first experiment we worked on together, the smell of chemicals in the air, the scratched wooden tables, and the way Emma laughed when I accidentally knocked over a measuring cylinder. It was not a dramatic beginning. There was no music playing and no movie-perfect moment. But over time, something warm and familiar grew between us. Emma knew things about me that almost no one else did. She knew my father had left when I was 12 and that my mother worked double shifts at a diner to keep our small apartment. She knew I was embarrassed to invite friends over because the heater barely worked in winter. I knew that her parents expected perfection from her and that she secretly wanted to study art, even though everyone around her insisted she should choose something more practical. In that laboratory, surrounded by test tubes and unfinished homework, we somehow became each other's safest place. I wanted to tell her how I felt many times. I almost did after the winter science fair when we won second place. I almost did on graduation day when she hugged me longer than usual. But fear has a strange way of convincing people that silence is safer than rejection. I kept telling myself there would be another day. Another chance. Another perfect moment. Then life moved faster than I expected. The summer after graduation, my mother lost her job. Bills piled up, our landlord raised the rent, and within weeks I was helping her pack our entire life into cardboard boxes. We moved to another city before I had the courage to properly say goodbye to Emma. I wrote her number on the inside cover of an old notebook, but somewhere during the move, the notebook disappeared. I told myself I would find her later. I would search for her after things settled down. But things never really settled. Years passed. I worked, studied part-time, took care of my mother when her health began to decline, and learned how easily a person could spend an entire life dealing with what was urgent while forgetting what was important. I dated other people, but nothing lasted. Eventually, I married, and eventually that marriage ended quietly, not because there had been a terrible betrayal, but because two people had slowly realized they wanted different lives. Through every stage, memories of Emma appeared unexpectedly. Sometimes it was the smell of rain on a school morning. Sometimes it was a song from the 90s. Sometimes I would see someone tying her hair into a loose ponytail and feel a strange ache for a version of myself who had once believed the future was endless. So when the invitation for our 25-year class reunion arrived, I almost threw it away. I imagined walking into a room full of strangers wearing the faces of people I used to know. I imagined awkward conversations, forced laughter, and questions about careers and families. But something inside me refused to let the invitation go. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe some part of me had been waiting 25 years for an answer to a question I had never dared to ask. Emma's hands were trembling when she asked about the letter. I told her I had never received anything from her. At first, she simply stared at me. Then she looked away, pressing her lips together as if she were trying not to cry. Finally, she told me what had happened. A week after our graduation, she had written me a long letter. In it, she had confessed that she had feelings for me too. She wrote about all the small moments I thought only I remembered. She wrote that she had waited for me to say something at graduation and had finally decided that if I could not find the courage, she would. She had mailed the letter to my old apartment 2 days before we moved away. My heart sank. I had never seen it. Emma had waited for a response. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. She thought my silence was my answer. She convinced herself that I had received the letter and chosen to ignore it. She moved on because she believed I did not care. And I had spent 25 years believing she had simply forgotten me. There we were, standing in the hallway of a hotel, surrounded by classmates celebrating old memories, while we discovered that our lives had been separated by nothing more dramatic than a letter arriving at an empty apartment. I wanted to be angry at fate. Angry at the post office. Angry at the young man I had been for leaving without telling her. But as Emma wiped away a tear, I realized something even more painful. Life rarely breaks our hearts with one enormous tragedy. Sometimes it does it through small moments we fail to understand. A phone call we never make. A door we never knock on. A letter that never arrives. We spent the rest of the evening talking. Not trying to recreate the past. Not pretending 25 years had disappeared. We spoke honestly about everything that had happened. Emma had become an art teacher. She had married once and divorced years later. She had no children, though she had spent most of her adult life helping hundreds of students believe in their talent. I told her about my mother, my marriage, my failures, and the dreams I had postponed until they quietly stopped feeling like dreams. At one point, Emma laughed and said that she still hated chemistry. I laughed too, and suddenly I was 17 again. But only for a moment. Because we were not 17 anymore. We had scars now. Regrets. Gray hair. Stories we would never have chosen. And perhaps that was what made the moment more beautiful. We were not meeting as the people we once were. We were meeting as the people life had made us. Before we left that night, Emma handed me a folded piece of paper. She had rewritten the letter. Not word for word, she explained, because she could no longer remember every sentence she had written at 18. But she had remembered the feeling. And she wanted me to finally have it. I did not open it until I got home. I sat alone at my kitchen table long after midnight, holding that paper in both hands. When I finally read it, the words were simple. She had cared for me. She had missed me. She had been afraid too. And after all these years, she had forgiven the silence. At the bottom, she had added one new sentence. This time, if you want to answer, you know where to find me.